What is happening, everybody? All right, figured I'd do a little impromptu late night edition of Mopar Chat for my fellow insomniacs. So, cheers to all of you guys. As always, brought to you by our favorite carcinogen, Diet Coke. So, anyway, what I wanted to talk about in the live chat is, the fallacy of potential, and this is something that comes up quite a bit. With a lot of the conversations that will come up, and you can imagine some of the conversations that I do end up having, they can get pretty weird, especially when guys start talking about things like horsepower, the potential of what their car can bring them, in other words. And what really kind of gets kind of tired about that conversation is, the whole conversation will revolve around this ultimate goal of insert number that sounds large here. And in recent years, it's been this 1,000 horsepower mark. And, one of the funny things that I've always found with that 1,000 horsepower mark is that guys tend to forget just how hard it is to take a platform that was never designed to make anywhere near that kind of power and get it to that level. The amount of tuning that has to take place, internal fortifications, drivability considerations, all of those things seem to kind of, fly by the wayside when you're looking at the build itself. It's this ultimate goal of 1,000 horsepower. And with the introduction of the Elephant and the sheer, buzz that engine created, I found it kind of interesting, really, because, for the most part, that 1,000 horsepower mark is something that, well, to be honest with you, has been attainable for quite a while. It's just that guys haven't really put forth the effort, say from about, 7 years ago into chasing that number. And the reason why they didn't chase the number, it was basically because it was, it's kind of a pain in the ass number. It's a white elephant number, which is kind of funny. The whole phrase, white elephant and the elephant engine, it kind of brings to light the thought that, have we kind of come full circle here with this chasing of 1,000 horsepower? Hondo, hey, what's up, man? Is it, are we in the era now where that 1,000 horsepower just isn't enough anymore? And it starts to get into this whole debate on, what is fast now, and I've talked about this before, but it really, with the advent of with the release rather of the Elephant engine, you do start to wonder, where is this going to stop? With CAFE regulations being pushed back, I think, to 2022, the more stringent CAFE regulations will kick in then for the automotive manufacturers. We're kind of in this real nice golden era of big horsepower, solid reliability, coupled with some reasonable affordability aspect to it. And this actually trickles down even into the naturally aspirated platforms. I mean, you're seeing unprecedented numbers from all manufacturers, but numbers that, for the States and for, American muscle and, for our, friends overseas, the Aussies who have long since had, kind of a sweetheart setup with some of the engines that they're able to have. But that we don't get in the States. Barra sound familiar? God, I'd love to have that engine over here. But at any rate, the idea is really more of, how far can we take this as a manufacturing community, or those in the manufacturing community? I guess their question would be, how far can we take this from a warrantability standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, from the standpoint of responsibility? And that's really also something that I want to talk about is, as these cars become progressively more powerful, how does the manufacturer justify or engineer safety and reliability into these big horsepower platforms. So, in saying that, I've got to bring up a car that I don't really like to talk about because, well, it's not released yet, and that's the GT500. My understanding is that it's going to be released sometime around, what is it, January some teenth. I can't remember, but it is going to be released in January. At least that's what the rumor is. And a lot of the buzz around the GT500 is stemming from the potential that the GT350 would show, or at least would insinuate that Ford would be able to put together a package that was balanced, that was all-encompassing, and made the power in a way that was, I don't know, reminiscent maybe of the older GT500s with a higher RPM capacity. Obviously, horsepower is going to be high, probably somewhere obviously north of 700 is what the rumor is. But, you know, I got to thinking about that. So is that going to be enough? With all of the hype that is surrounding that car, will it be enough? Here's what I think. You know, I have said this time and time and time again. One of my all-time favorite cars to drive has been the GT500. And one of the things that is hey, Symphonics, what's happening? You know, one of the things that I'm hoping for that GT500 is that they make it really more accessible, especially on a level that folks can actually afford, and it's not going to come in at some, you know, $85,000 or $90,000 price tag. That's really my take on that car. I'm watching it with bated breath. Don't get me wrong. You know, I am flying the flag of Mopar really high here, obviously with my Hellcat, which I've actually really grown to love, a stock Hellcat, and have no real desire to mod it in terms of power, although durability mods are coming. And by the way, did a drive shaft install on the car, and I'm not going to mention any name brands or anything like that. Not going to put anybody on blast, but damn, that was a fail. But I was kind of beta testing a new design, so put the stock drive shaft back in the car. The aftermarket drive shaft vibrated severely. At highway speeds, it was vibrating pretty badly, and obviously, you know, I didn't want to take it too high up in the, you know, anywhere past highway speeds. Did a passing situation with it, discovered it was nowhere near correct, so pulled it off, put the stock shaft back on, and it's gone back, and now it's, you know, we'll wait for the new shaft to come in. Let me get some questions here or comments. Symphonics saying, yo, B. Mason, what's up, Symphonics? Saying, is Chevy really going to release all C8s as mid-engine and $170,000 cars? They got to make the C8 affordable to the upper middle class in the 55K range. Otherwise, their sales are going to drop a lot. My understanding is that the mid-engine C8, or the C8 is going to run independently of the C7. The C8 is going to be a separate entity in and of itself and not a Corvette C7 replacement, so to speak. It will supersede it only in platform and not in actual practice. For the Corvette to move away from their status as the everyman's sports car and, quite honestly, a world-beating brand and platform as it sits as a front-engine, rear-drive, you know, American muscle meets sports car finesse type, type of a way of marketing it. I cannot imagine them getting away from that. And my understanding, the way it's been explained to me, is that they are going to be separate entities. So, let's see, Honda, what's my take on Diablo Tuner and HP Tuner for RAM? Well, I mean, HP Tuner for me is what I'm used to. Both of them are equally as powerful in terms of programming. HP Tuners, though, seems to, I don't know, this is kind of, HP Tuners seems to have a little bit more as far as development behind them. So there's a, I'm not going to say there's more in the HP Tuners, but HP Tuners seems to be a little bit I'm not going to say more of a sophisticated software, but again, I'm going to be biased towards HP tuners because that's what I'm used to working with. But both of them work great. Phoenix 98 hollering at it, everybody. Sup, y'all? B Mason fam representing. See, let's see. Uncle Stink Ford Wet Bottom. That's a freaking awesome name, by the way. 2021 Ford Deuce 6 Charger. What's the skinnish? Well, we keep hearing rumors about it. Whether it's a Charger with a 426, a Challenger, whether they're going to wait to release it in the new platform, or if they're going to have a swan song for the LX platform, at least the current LX platform, the way it sits. We keep hearing rumors, we keep hearing all this talk, but, to be honest with you guys, I will keep saying this until one of them shows up at a dealership or there's some big press release or whatever. I don't see a 426 going into a production car anytime real soon, mainly because the 392 is such a solid platform, at least from a, manufacturing standpoint. It's already been tested. It's already been, put through the ringer as far as emission standards and whatnot. And yes, I get it. With a power adder, it's not necessarily a great platform, but for what it was designed to do, it actually does extremely well, especially when you consider that the horsepower and torque per weight of the 392 is on par with any of the modern engines, and it's an iron block. I would actually, to be honest with you, I would rather see an aluminum block 392 supersede the iron block 392 if there's going to be any changes at all. But, I just don't know if that's going to be feasible. And then you get into the bean counter part of this. That's really the tough part is with all the money that FCA has put into Dodge and into the Hellcat platform, and of course by way of association, the Red Eye and the Demon. I don't know that there's going to be that much development there for the NA guys, unfortunately. So if they make one, that'll be great. I would love to be a fly on the wall for any durability testing of the 426, long-term durability testing. I just don't know if they're going to actually be able to make it. But if they did, I would be real interested in that car, only because for me, power and torque, that's always going to be a big deal. The bigger the engine, better torque, better power. But, there's a durability aspect there that I'm just not so sure that, you can engineer anything, but with the current setup, I'm not sure they'll be able to. Let's see. Symphonics is chiming in again. My man says, so the C8 will be sold alongside C7. Sounds good. As long as the LT1 gets a little power bump. Can't have the same 460 horse as a Mustang. Got to bump it to $5 bills, in my opinion. And my opinion is shared, my friend. So my problem with Chevy and the LT1 right now is that, to me, Chevy seems to kind of be resting on their laurels a little bit. But you got to put everything into perspective. It's when they engineer these power plants, they do have a certain production run that they have to work with. The LT1 is actually a pretty solid and stout engine. The downside to it is that the Coyote is also, and the Coyote is a very strong performer. I think the LT1, when paired with a 10-speed automatic, would really shine. I think the new Camaro with the 10-speed automatic is going to be something that the Mustang's going to have a very hard time dealing with. And in that respect, a bump in power won't necessarily help them too much. The second thing about the LT1, and at least the powertrain that it's running with right now with the 8-speed, is gearing. I don't understand for the life of me why they could not, in the Chevrolet, why Chevrolet could not give that car at least an option for a more aggressive rear gear. As it sits, I think a 280 something. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not a 309. I can tell you that. And it never really made a whole lot of sense to me why that car was shackled with modest gearing. So, you know, in lieu of a bump in power, I'd like to see him have some options for rear gear for that car. I think with that new transmission and with a rear gear upgrade, or at least with a rear gear option, it'll breathe new life into that platform. You know, and guys, as much shit as I've talked about the Camaro, it's almost, you know, it's done from a place of love, really. I mean, I want all three to do well. Obviously, I want my beloved Mopar to do the best, but we need all three to be in the hunt. And hopefully Chevrolet can do something to get themselves back on par with Mustang. And I got to be honest with you guys. I mean, FCA is mopping the floor clean with Camaro in terms of outright sales. I mean, the marketplace will dictate what they need to do to get that car where it needs to be, where it's competitive, not only on the drag strip, but in the showroom as well. So there's my take on that. Let's see. Hang on. This thing. Come on, scroll here. Sherrod Nelson comes in. Good evening, B. Good evening, man. Have you guys tuned any 2018 392s? If so, what's the problem with the PCMs? Yeah, actually, tons of 18s. There's not really a problem with a PCM. You just need to get a smart cable installed. And what that does is it works in conjunction with the physical unlocking of the PCM. It's just FCA is a second tier in level of encryption and level of security. By the way, it is pouring down rain right now. So wanted to take the car out tonight, but Mother Nature had other plans. Let's see. Uncle Stinkford Wet Bottom chimes in. Thanks for the acknowledgement, but I'm asking because I heard the Dodge is working on a D-Tune 426 that passes emissions. Heard it will be the 2021 Charger wide-body Hellcat. I've heard the same thing. That 426, he's talking about the Elephant in this case. That would be a logical move for FCA to debut the engine as a crate engine and then have the ability to, you know, detune that thing, have it run on 93 octane and put it in the Charger for the wide body. I've heard that. You know, there's no telling. I've heard both sides of it. I've heard that it is going to remain a crate engine only, and the 426 displacement will not be carried over into production. I've heard that the aluminum block 426 will be also offered as a crate platform, as well as the supercharger from the Elephant as a separate unit, as a Mopar part number. So if you've got a Hellcat or a Red Eye or a Demon, it'll be a very viable alternative in terms of upping the power a little bit for those platforms. But, you know, right now, nobody's really let the cat out of the bag, but the rumor mill is circulating pretty strong, and that is the strongest rumor that I have heard as well, is that they will be releasing a wide-body Charger, and that the wide-body Charger will be available with that Elephant engine. I don't know that I would take it that far. I'll say sure on the wide-body Charger because it would be freaking cool as hell, and it would look amazing. And I would say they would probably put the Red Eye platform in that before they put the 426. Let's see. Symphonics. Can they fit a 10-speed into a C7 since it is a transaxle? Man, you can engineer anything. I don't know that it will fit the way that it sits now, but and a lot of that, by the way, has more to do with weight and balance than anything else. The 10-speed is heavier than the 8-speed, and so I think they didn't bother with the 10-speed for the Vet mainly because of that weight bias and the weight balance that they're shooting for that car. So, but it seems logical to me. I don't know why you wouldn't run a 10-speed in that car, and in my opinion, it needs it, especially the Z06. Let's see. Cody Ruthman asked, what do I think of the SRT 10 trucks? He says his neighbor had a manual one in college, and it was a lot of fun. I bet it was. I actually really like those trucks a lot. it's just another case of Dodge doing something completely unexpected and unnecessary. Direct line of sight competitor to the Lightning of the time. Always see, they've proven themselves to be fairly durable, provided you got a manual transmission. They kind of ate through automatics, but that was to be expected from back then. Durable platform, the Viper engine itself. There's my old girl right there. You always see her in the picture. She's always with us. It's my old 99 ACR. Did set the all-motor record for stock displacement with that car. But the Viper engine is actually incredibly durable. That thing is, you can power a tank with that thing. I don't know. I'd love to see them actually make a comeback with that, or at least start putting Hellcat engines in trucks soon. Let's see. Did I miss anybody? I think I missed somebody here. Oh, no. Chevy has problems because a female runs the company. Yeah. No comment. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Q&H, E85 and a 5.7. Don't bother. Let's see. Unless you're going boosted, and then bother a lot. It's the only way to go. Let's see. Oh, dang it. This freaking thing. Ahmed Al-Rasi asked, do I recommend getting an 09 Pontiac G8, and what are your thoughts on it? Man, I put a video together a while back on my thoughts on G8s and GTOs. Man, I like those cars a lot. It's a Holden Monero. It's a gray import, so to speak, and I absolutely love those cars. They were the Challenger and the Charger before there was a Challenger and a Charger, and those were the cars that kind of got GM through the dark days of not having the Camaro. They're a lot of fun to drive. There's really not a downside to them, other than people complain about the wheel well size and all of that. But just like with any other car, independent rear suspension, mods that'll help quell wheel hop, stronger axles, maybe a drive shaft. Although I didn't really ever hear problems with drive shafts because they can't really put a big tire on the back, so they typically just blow the tires up, which is always fun. But no, I like those cars a lot. They're built like a freaking battleship, so don't sweat it. I think you'll have a lot of fun. LSX Jimmy, my brother, what's happening? Speaking of rumors, word on Facebook is that NA392 went 1060s. Well, how high did they drop that thing off of what building? Let's see. Yeah, shoot me the link on that. But does NA mean nitrous assisted? Be my first thoughts. Actually, you know what? I'll tell you something. I'm aware of actually 3 guys with 392 cars now that have either gone just into the 10s or are getting awfully close to it. I say more power to them. My only issue is, at what point does that car, at what point have you taken that car to a point where it's just not really drivable, and how realistic are those numbers? And what I mean by that is, are you running that thing on race gas? How much timing are you running through it? When LSX Jimmy and I set the records on the same day, by the way, at my track rental, when we both set the record for NA 392 on pump gas, it was funny because we did it with cars that we literally didn't do anything to the tune. That Pikes Performance tune just was on the money. These were daily driven or daily drivable cars. In the case of the outright record, for Jimmy, it was a drag pack and a little bit of weight reduction, and boom, 1125. I'd like to know where that number comes from, and if there's a I don't know if there's a caveat to it. I ran mine on 93 octane Bucky's gas, so there's that. Let's see. Smoking 05. Howdy, Mason. Howdy, Smoking. Stock 17 TA392A8. If I use 305 drag radials, do I need to install rear diff cradle or any other parts for durability? Thank you. Well, not necessarily. I do recommend this, though. If you're going to run 305s, get yourself a set of 10.5-inch wide replicas and put those tires on those wheels. The reason for that is the 305 contact patch gets a little wonky on the 9.5-inch wheel. You never will be able to take full advantage of it. When I put the 10.5-inch wheel on the back of mine, I was at the drag strip running at 30 psi with my Nitto Tri 5s, and they would dead hook. So just take that with a grain of salt, my man. If you've already got the tires, just as good. Don't sweat it. But to get the best performance out of them, you're going to have to go with that 10.5-inch wide rear wheel. Take my advice. Been there and done that with that. Let's see. Unc Stink Ford, Wet Bottom chiming in. Yeah, he says he had heard pretty much the same thing. Yeah, that's what I heard. Caesar Curso, can't understand what you're trying to say. We're gonna need to keep it to anglais over here, brother. Je parle français un petit peu, mais nothing else in España. Let's see. Show me Mopar. B Mason, what's happening, brother? Talking handling. 16 Scat Charlie, 8-speed. Have drag pack. You think for cornering benefit, set of wheels, 9.5-inch front, 10.5-inch rear, or just go wider 305s, or is 275/40 plenty for carving? The good thing about the Challengers and Chargers is they have weight on their side, so you're going to want to have about as much tire back there as you can, depending on how aggressive you're getting. But yeah, 9.5s up front, 10.5s rear, 305, 35s in the back, 275s up front. You'll have no problem with it. You'll have a lot of fun with that car too. By the way, if you guys have never actually had an opportunity to take your car out and just play with it, leave the drag racing on the shelf and just take the car out and just go carve in one of these big girls. You'll find very quickly that if you're used to sports car handling, when you get into the big cars, they're actually in some ways a lot more fun, because you can literally feel the weight transfer in that car. And the other cool thing is that with the right set of tires on the back of it, I'm not talking about going with a Turos, go with a set of G8 and Nittos, NT Tri 5s, just the regular ones, what have you. In that 305 on a 10.5-inch wheel, you can kind of manhandle them a little bit, and they're a lot of fun. So yeah, get them out and have a little bit of fun with them. You might find that you get a new appreciation for just how fun that car can be. Show me Mopar. B Mason es en Estados Unidos. Sí. Mi casa es en el Texas. Yes, un intelligent and hombre. Muchas gracias, amigo. Saying I'm smart in Spanish. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You need to have a conversation with my wife and convince her of the same. Symphonic. So is the GT500 going after the Demon or the ZL1 1LE, and any chance of it beating either one of them at their respective games? Great question. Great chance it'll beat it. I mean, you've got the full engineering might of Ford Motor Company behind the GT500. And look, the funny thing is that the ZL1 is a fantastic car, and it's a well-balanced car, but it's not going to beat the GT500 in any metric that is significant. And I'll be honest with you, as much as I've been kind of side-mouthing the GT500, I've also been kind of side-eyeing it a little bit as well. I'm just such a big fan of the older GT500s, and I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of that old heritage, so to speak, built into the new one. I am convinced that based on power, suspension geometry, suspension tuning, that GT500 is going to at least, if not embarrass, roundly beat the ZL1 in all areas, whether it's on the drag strip, on a road course, just in terms of actual driving feel, just backcountry carbon, that kind of stuff, just hooning around with it. I just don't see the ZL1 having any answer for it whatsoever. I mean, you combine the added power of a supercharged 4-valve, whether it's going to be Coyote derivative, which I pretty much think it will be, maybe a Coyote Voodoo displacement type of a situation. But you start looking at it from that point of view, and it's going to be curtains for that ZL1. Anthony Stradwick asking, what do I think of the Elephant and the Challenger 2020? I would say I would hope that they move forward with it. I would like to see them basically do a swan song for the LX platform with that engine. I think that would be a great way to go out. But I couch that by saying that it will only be special to me when they do release a 426 naturally aspirated in that platform. I can't explain why that is. There's a certain level of purist in me that just can't get past it. An NA 426 and then a blown 426. I don't know. God, that would be a 1-2 punch that no other manufacturer could touch. And it would really fit in line with Mopar's that marketing and grabbing the past heritage. They always fall back on that, but they're not driving it with the 392. The displacement of 392, which, by the way, is every bit as historically significant as the 426. And a lot of people tend to forget that. In some cases, actually, it may be even more so. But they just don't drive that home. It's always the 426, 426, 426. God, why not? At some point, if you're going to have the 392, please market it properly. Mopar, are you hiring, man? Come on. I need to get over there and just make everything better. Houston, we have a problem. No video. Oh, I'm back on. Oh, man, I might have answered the meaning of life and nobody saw it. Oh, my God. But, yeah, it is raining its ass off over here. Okay, we're back on. Anthony Stradwick asking, can I put a supercharger in the, I guess he's 392. If so, what else? Yeah, you can supercharge it. Just don't expect to conquer the world with that platform. It's more of a limitation of the pistons in that car than anything else. And with the cars that I've driven, you need to be pushing at least 7 to 8 pounds of boost before supercharging will make a big difference. If you're talking a centrifugal style supercharger like a Pro Charger, my advice is to go positive displacement with a 392. 2 reasons. One, it's a cleaner install, and not only is it cleaner from an installation standpoint, but intake air temps are more easily mitigated. And 2, it's a heavy car. You need to have that torque hit down low. Think about it, guys. There's a reason why OEs don't go with centrifugal superchargers. They're just not as much fun to drive. Let's see. Uncle Steve Webb on him says his 392 Charger is going to be getting the Petty's Garage treatment next year. That'll be fun. I like Petty's Garage stuff. Mile tune, 600 rear wheel horsepower. I'm just wondering what's coming down the pipe for Dodge. That's the thing you've got to consider. And let me go full stop and not really crazy Ivan the conversation here, but if you are planning on putting any money into a 392 right now, you desperately need to check yourself. There are a ton of Hellcats that are coming up for sale right now, mainly because leases have expired. A lot of guys did 2 and 3 year leases on these cars. Leases are expiring. Guys are moving on to other platforms, what have you. And the market, I'm not saying that the market's flooded with a lot of clean Hellcats, but, and don't get me wrong, and I was blessed to find the car that I found. I mean, it wasn't even broken in really when I bought it. 3 and almost 4 years after it was bought. That car is a 1-owner car, ultra low mileage, super pretty, the whole bit, with every cosmetic flaw you could have from Mopar. Great job, Mopar. Build quality, third. So anyway, or at least fit and finish third. And understand that the Hellcat as a unit, just as a powertrain unit, that is far and away more robust than the 392. That being said, what's coming down the pipe, it's going to be fairly special. And it just, again, and if you're looking to get more power and then more power still, I would highly suggest taking a look at maybe not necessarily holding off on it. I don't want to talk you out of anything, but there are some things that are coming from Dodge that are going to be exciting. And I would rather have the funds freed up to put into one of the newer platforms, especially 2020, 2021, when they start to talk about the new revision of the LX platform, the lightening of the LX platform. That's going to be a thing, and that's going to really open up the floodgates for guys to start either getting rid of Hellcats or picking those new cars up, and they are going to be pretty special to say the least. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Smoking05 said, don't bother. It said, I said, don't bother E85 on the 5.7. Is it the same for the NA64? Here's the thing with E85 on an NA engine. The reason why I said don't bother is you can pick up torque with E85 with these engines, but the problem is that the intake manifolds really can't support high RPM, and high RPM is what you need, or high compression, to really take the best advantage of E85. You can pick up on average around 15 odd horsepower, but you can pick up 25 pound-feet of torque down low with the E85. The reason why E85 doesn't pick up a lot of horsepower on an NA car is because you're not forcing air into that cylinder. So because the engine is sucking air into the cylinder, you have a finite amount of air coming in, as opposed to just being able to turn up the boost, and, well, it'll still be a finite amount, but it'll be forced induction. E85 has a mass that is lighter than gasoline, but you have to run 30 to 40% more of the E85 to create the same amount of energy as gasoline. Well, because of that, the fuel mass itself is displacing the oxygen. It's displacing the air. And even though E85 ethanol does carry oxygen with it, it doesn't carry enough to displace the amount of air coming in. Now, with more timing and with, you can get into intake manifold stuff here and all of that, ported heads, and you can put together a combination that can help to take advantage of E85, but you won't be able to get as much out of it. And especially with the 5.7 having a lower compression ratio, it's just not going to be able to do as well. The 6.4 will build torque down low, a pretty decent amount of torque, but it won't build the power up top. And really going through the gears, if it's not building the power up top, it'll be a little bit more fun to drive, but and from what I've seen anyway, it's definitely worth it if you're shooting for a number at the drag strip, but just in general, I'd say don't worry about it, especially with the 5.7 because it's lower compression. Keenan H says, I plan on lowering my car soon. You think I should go with springs or coilovers? Thanks. If you can afford the coilover setup, go coilovers every time. Gives you a much greater range of adjustability. The springs are good if you just want simplicity. It just depends on how particular you are about the ride height, the stance, and the overall quality of the car's ride in general. But I like coilovers, but I like coilovers if I'm having the conversation, but I like springs if I'm going to put them on my car. Symphonic says, I believe the GT500 will clearly beat a ZL1 on the strip, but that ZL1 1LE on the track is on another level. It is, but get ready for another level on top of that with a GT500, because Ford believe me when I tell you, probably has 3 ZL1 1LEs just sitting around waiting to go head to head with that GT500 in any situation. Because remember, you know, Camaro is always, you know, trying to be more Mustang than Mustang. So, you know, that's a battle that's never going to quit. As long as there's a Mustang and a Camaro existing in the same universe, they are sworn enemies front to back, even though they did collab on that transmission, which I think is cool. Toby Rama checks in with, would it be doable to make this is kind of different subframes for my truck to be able to quickly bolt in the motor and trans in and out at the track? Would it be wise? I wouldn't bother with that at all, man. I mean, build you a well, technically yes, you could with custom motor mounts, but I would never want to pull motor trans out at the track. That would be a beating. Show me Mopar. Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I love it. B Mason with the flex. Speaking of flex, so my fat ass has been out of training now for a while. I will soon be back in the gym, back in training, be working heavy bag. Probably, I'm going to try to get back up to about 15 rounds per night. So I got to cut weight. But thank you very much. I just got sidetracked by the flex thing. Chasing Cars asks, what gear ratio would you recommend for a Ram 1500 with the 5.7? Always 392. Always 392. That's always the right answer, is 392. Well, let me rephrase that. It depends on if it's a four-wheel drive truck. Is it a regular cab? What are you looking to do with it? I will say this. I did not see any markable difference in fuel economy between my 323s and my 392 gears that were in my old work truck. I actually had a lot of fun with that truck, with the 392s. There's not really a drawback to them. The 323s do better on the highway just in terms of kick down, partial throttle kick down. For some reason, they seem a little bit more responsive, but when you map the throttle, those 392s will really put a smile on your face. I would recommend, though, if you are going to be playing with it, get, oh crap. I think, does BMR or Spawn sell them? I think Spawn sells them. Get a new set of 4 links for it. Get the Spawn setup for it so you kind of quell a little bit of the wheel hop. Let's see. Toby Runsenju says, I'd like to see the Polara and or the Monaco come back. Damn, that's actually a pretty good point. I really would like to see a little bit more of the old school, 70s setup, for lack of a better way of putting it. The old lineup, I should say. What some call the Malaise era, the just nice, big, chunky sedan. The problem is that the market is moving away from cars in general. SUVs are taking over the marketplace for either good or for bad. The trend with SUVs kind of ebbs and flows with fuel prices, but from a practicality standpoint, what the fuck? From a practicality standpoint and from just a utility standpoint, the sport utilities are better, but dude, how cool would it be to see a Monaco? That would be badass. Uncle Stink Ford, Wet Bottom. There we go. Thank you very much. Hemi Chrysler says, I love listening to you, man. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. Let's see. Amy Chrysler says, 33-year mechanic who owns his garage, and you sound just like the Mopar god. That was my grandfather. Man, I appreciate that. Yeah, speaking of grandfathers, I every day, man, I miss mine. He, he taught me how to drift in a 1984 Dodge pickup. So, yeah. But cool, man. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much. Mopar No Car. Do you like the Dodge Viper? Well, if you look right there, that's my old girl. That is my 99 ACR from back in the day. Love the Viper. Had a real long conversation several years ago before the Viper was axed with one of the marketing guys with FCA, and we had a long discussion about the Viper, where it was headed. At the time, it was a lot of stuff was hush hush. I obviously didn't have a channel at the time, but would have had to kept my mouth shut about a lot of the things that I heard and a lot of the things that were coming for the Viper. Still, even to this day, there's some things that can't really let the cat out of the bag too much, at least for what the plans were at that time. Can't really speak on where things are now. But what I will say is this: love the Viper. Would like to see the Viper be a direct line of sight competitor to the Corvette. It used to drive me and still drives me nuts to this day when I talk about the Viper and the fact that they never actually put something together that would be able to be in the same cage at the same time as the Vette. The Vette was always a lower price alternative that gave all but the same performance in the real world. I mean, not on the track, not on the drag strip, but for the layman, the Corvette was the logical choice. The Viper was also significantly more expensive and was significantly more intimidating at that time. Now, as the Viper progressed and the Corvette progressed, that space kind of narrowed a little bit, but still the Viper was far and away more expensive. A lot of that had to do with the fact that it had the V10. A little trivia port here for you. A lot of guys will say, well, the Viper isn't the Viper without the V10. Guys, do you understand, and this is the trivia part, the Viper, when Carroll Shelby was part of the development process of the Viper, which he was, by the way, was completely against the V10. That engine really, it was a great engine, still is, but that car would have done so much better with an all-aluminum V8 of some kind. And we move forward with that platform at some point. Let's see. Toby Ramos sends you asks, why do people say that Hemi is subpar compression when it has one of the highest compression ratios of modern engines? I think what you're really talking about is if it's subpar. If the question is if the Hemi is subpar in relation to a wedge engine, I think is really more to the point. The Hemi is unbelievably amazing at being volumetrically efficient. And to be honest with you, any 4-valve engine is technically Hemi-ish. It's actually not, but same concept, flow-through head, but with your intake valves on one end, exhaust valves on the other. What's also known as a shotgun head. Pentastar head is the other way that they call it. Not because it's Chrysler Pentastar, but it's just kind of the way it's shaped. It's kind of the top part of a Pentastar on that cylinder head. Those heads are unbelievably good at volumetric efficiency, but at thermal efficiency, they're not as good. So they're a great cylinder head design. They flow a ton of air, but it is a tumble port, and tumble ports are a little bit less efficient than a wedge head. It's one of the reasons why Hemis now have 2 spark plugs. It's to help with volumetric efficiency. Try to get some volumetric efficiency back in that Hemi head. Let's see. Oh, hang on. Fading away here. Time out. Cranman chimes in with, I'll be honest with you, I don't see the point of doing any tuning. Long tube exhaust intake on my 392 Charger. I'll pull on my buddies with those exact bolt-ons. Thoughts? So here's the thing with, it says Cranman says he has a factory freak. So here's the thing with the 392. So let's start with exhaust. The cam profile doesn't really work well with long tube headers. The lobe separation angle is 121 degrees, and there's just not the amount of actual physical time for scavenging at high RPM. that you would get out of out of a camshaft with more actual with a tighter LSA with more duration. As far as that goes, no, tuning will help not only with throttle response, pick up a little bit of power, but the trans tuning is the thing that is really going to help it the most. And then, of course, if you go catless, you don't have to worry about going into cat overtemp mode, which again is a good thing to consider at some point. Get the AFR a little bit more in line with where it should be. But man, 392s run good. I freaking love a well-sorted 392. So no, I hear you. Let's see. Stephen Vinoy, good morning. Top of the morning to you. Grandman says cars are also tuned at a very reputable shop. Man, 392s are strong, man. I'll put them up against pretty much anything. Roush 727 comes in with, says he plans on taking a stock 18 Hellcat Charger to the track for the first time. Awesome. You're going to have a blast. What do I think I should, I guess you're saying, what do you think I should do to the car in preparation for the track? Well, first start off by making sure that your oil is changed, or at least is fit for the challenge. Don't take it to the drag strip. Put it under a heavy load with either low oil or obviously with an old oil change. Check the filter. Make sure the filter, how quick that filter does get dirty, and replace it with a stock Hellcat filter in the process. Aside from that, you're going to want to put a set of drag radials on the back of that thing, or some kind of a drag setup, because taking your Hellcat to the drag strip on stock tires is pointless. Aside from maybe being able to leg the car out on the back end, you'll be pedaling that car for the first 100 feet trying to get that thing to hook up. If you're going to take it to the drag strip, that car definitely needs to have a drag style tire on the back of it. And then when you go to launch the car, get used to it on the street before you run the car. But your cadence, just kind of roll into the throttle, let the car do its thing, put the settings in your trans in sport, your suspension in street, and just get out there and have a good time. Burnout, get out of the water box, back into the water box, get the tires a little bit wet, come out of the water box about 6 feet, then start your burnout, do about a 6-second burnout just to get a little heat in them, roll off the throttle, let the car's inertia pull you forward, stage it, have a good time. That would be my best advice. Don't be too aggressive with it, and she'll do just fine. If you do have a set of drag radials on the back, take a look at how the other cars are launching, but put the car on the converter to about 11 or 1200 RPM. Don't try to flash the converter coming off of idle, and don't try to stall it too high because it'll just blow the tires off. Stradwick, what tuner would I recommend for the 392 if you're talking about software? Performance Tunes out of Houston, Texas. And if there is, if you don't have the ability to do remote tunes, then there's a couple of other tuners that are out there that I would recommend, but get a hold of Pite, see if they can work with you on a remote tune. But for a stock 392, that car is pretty easy to tune. He's done, I don't know, hundreds, like multiple hundreds of 392s. So, and varying camshafts, things like that. So we'll see how she does. Show Me Mopar asks, any plans on going to the road course in Redline Red? Yes, Revlon may be making her debut on a road course. Plenty of videos out there with Scats and Cats doing just fine at VIR. Yes, they are. Atlanta Raceway. Scat's got his Scat's got springs and braces. 11s at strip on road course. Nice. How fun would that be? A lot. So I may be dragging that car out to Motorsports Ranch this spring. I do need to get a different set of wheels and tires for it before I do that, because I don't want to tear up what I've got on it now. But I have some plans to just take it out there and not try to get any specific time out of it. Just get it out there and have a little bit of fun. Mix it up a little bit, because drag racing is a lot of fun, but you get your car out on a closed circuit and it's a whole different ball game. And it's also more fun when you take a car or a truck or whatever the platform is, when you take something on a road course or at an autocross event or whatever, you take something out there that's not really supposed to be there per se. God, it's a lot more fun than taking something out there that's purpose built. It reminds me of, when I used to do a lot of track days with motorcycles, and you'd see guys and girls out there on, their beater SV650 just tearing it up and having a ball. You can be ham-fisted with them. That's kind of the same thing with the Hellcat. You get out there with something that's, big, it's heavy, it's a bit lumbering and makes a whole lot of torque, whole lot of horsepower, but you feel the weight going around corners. You really feel it under braking. Braking zones become a real thing when you've got a big, heavy car like that. So, these things are important. Accelerating through the apex, the finesse that you have to have. It actually takes some skill to get one around a road course. So, it's a lot of fun, and I do plan on doing that. It's still in my blood. I just haven't had an opportunity to, to exercise that. But Toby Rama checks in with, obviously, if the Monaco comes back, the Crown Vic has to as well. How do you kill the Crown Vic? Good point again. It drives me nuts that they killed the freaking Panther platform. For some reason, I just love those cars. The old Caprice, in some respect, not so much, but good grief, man. You talk about a freaking workhorse, man. But yeah, I would love to see that come back. Symphonic says, I remember you saying that the L88 was one of your favorite engines of all time. Can you explain what made that engine so special? Yes, I can. All aluminum 427. So what he's talking about, the L88 was a limited production engine that Chevrolet made in the 60s, specifically for SCCA, and it trickled into drag racing as well. But it was an all aluminum 427 solid lifter engine. And when people talk about the Hemi, the 426 Hemi, as being underrated, that's part of the myth and the allure of the 426 Hemi. They're talking about the original super stock Hemi, the one that would actually look a lot like this model. That would be your original super stock Super Commando 426. And yes, they called it Super Commando. I actually have a pamphlet that came with the original cars, the 64 Polara. Anyway, put this back. That's the engine that they're talking about. They're not talking about the street Hemi, but they think they're talking about the street Hemi. And that engine was a very well-documented 425 horsepower. And what a lot of folks don't know is that in SAE for the time testing, which was with a fan and with a partial exhaust system, it made 390 horsepower. And that was the street Hemi, the low compression hydraulic flat tappet. The L88 was rated at 425 or 425 horse. It was actually rated less than the Tri-Power 427, which was 435. That engine realistically was 525, 550 horsepower. There was also a 396 version, albeit with an iron block, but had L88 heads. I think it was an L79, if memory serves me correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that one was rated, I think, at 375, and that was horse shit. That engine was more like 500 horsepower. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why that engine is such a freaking awesome thing. And I don't know, they didn't make that many of them, and for lack of it's funny too, because Chevrolet really didn't hang any marketing on that. And if you notice, that L series, like LT1, LT4, all of that seems to, they're reviving that, but I don't know if they'll ever revive the L88 name, because that's gonna mean that's gonna be the baddest of the badass engines that they put out. Miguel, saludos. Desde Mexico, bro. Salud, I guess is what that means. Sorry, I don't speak Spanish, but what's happening? ¿Cómo se dice what's happening in español? I guess it's que pasa, right? Keaton H, will I need a tune for replacing my stock intake manifold with the 6.1? Yeah, you will actually. You'll need a tune. You're going to need to kill the codes for your short runner valves, and you will need a, you definitely will need a tune because it's going to, well, the air delivery is going to be different with that intake. It's not like it's a bad intake, but I would suggest doing some work to that intake. See if you can find a ported one. I wouldn't put a stock 6.1 on a 6.4. The heads require just more airflow than what that intake is going to be able to deliver. Grandman, B. Mason, appreciate you very much. It says, thanks for answering all of these questions we have for you. A lot of knowledge in that bald head of yours. I'm going to chime in with bald because it is. See you on the next one, Crayman. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. We'll see you on the next one. Toby Rama asked, is the 392 harken back to the old 392 that was in the 58 Imperials? I'd like to make sense being that both those motors are perfect twins in terms of cubic inches. Yes, it is, but more to the point, when Don Garlett started racing and when a lot of guys started racing back in the day, and I mean back in the day, the only Hemis that were available were the 331, 352, and the 392. And some, by the way, will argue that the 331 is technically a better engine to build a hot rod out of, but 392 has more displacement and it wins by default. Those engines were what were going into land speed cars in Bonneville, and we're also going into the original drag race cars, the nitro drag race cars as well, that were when drag racing was really coming into its true adolescence, so to speak, just after and just into the mid 50s. Down one. Got one on standby. That engine is really what propelled Mopar and drag racing and land speed racing and all that. That 392 and its sibling engines, the smaller displacement 390 Hemis, were what was propelling, so to speak, those cars down the drag strip and into land speed racing. And that's why, to me, when you look at it from at least that point of view, they had more success with the first generation, the Gen 1 Hemis, in terms of racing in all areas, not just in NASCAR, not just in drag racing, but grassroots effort type racing, stock car racing. With those early Hemis, I mean, you just couldn't touch that engine in terms of outright power, especially when companies started making camshafts for them, intake manifolds for them. I mean, these engines, it wasn't uncommon to get, and for the time, these were huge numbers, but 350 horsepower, I mean, you could get that out of those engines. And then with the 392s into 400 and, with forced induction, 500, 600 horsepower, these power figures were unheard of. And it really did help to set the table to solidify that platform in the, for the future. But, from a grassroots standpoint, if you're hearkening back to history, that Gen 1 Hemi, I mean, it basically, it set the standard for anything that the 426 had yet to come. And, really the success of the 426 is almost more predicated by the success of drag racing in general. There was a point in time where, drag racing, that just the sport, the lifestyle of drag racing really took off in the early 60s and late 50s, mid to late 50s, really came into its own in the early 60s. So let's see. Heidi Badoon says, catless mids with a tune. What are expected gains for a 392? Well, in terms of power, you can look at about 15 odd horsepower and about that plus a couple more maybe in torque. But keep in mind, that is going to be throughout the entire rev range. So, that number becomes more of a percentage of the actual power down low for the horsepower. And of course, torque, you want that number everywhere. But to look at the power increase and the power number that you get is only going to tell you part of the tale, so to speak. I mean, you really need to look at throttle response, the way that the car is going to drive just as an overall package. It will be more responsive and more fun to drive. You get into the transmission tuning of it along with that, and you will completely change the complexion of that car. As a matter of fact, when I drove my car and then I would drive a bone stock car, there was a definite difference between the two, more so than you might think if you're just basing your decision off of dyno numbers. So, be wary of dyno numbers, by the way. Let's see. Stephen Vinoy, 426 stroker with short tube headers or long tube headers and tune setup. Depends on really what you're going for. I mean, if the 426 is going into, a Challenger or Charger, it's going to depend on your cam profile, but, that block's going to be out of the car anyway. I'd say go with long tubes at that point. You might as well spend the money. You're going to take the best advantage of whatever aftermarket camshaft you put in the car with the long tube headers, and realistically, you're not really double paying for labor at that point. And the guy's just going to put the headers in because, I'm sure he's got the cradle drop. He's just going to set it all up as one unit and then bring the car down to the cradle. So, I say, go long tubes at that point. And in the tune, obviously there will be provisions in the tune for the long tubes. There's a handful of parameters that you have to change when you put a set of long tubes in. Let's see. Stephen Vinoy says, does the model run? He's talking about, no, I wish it did. That'd be cool. So I will tell you this, though. That's a bit, I've put together real engines in less amount of time than it took me to put that damn thing together. Dude. But no, it's a big ass model. If y'all want to see if y'all haven't seen it or weren't on the show yet, this is the model that he was talking about. I built one of these 8-scale Hemi model engines. Kind of a rainy day, didn't have anything better to do, and figured I'd burn a little bit of time putting this thing together. It's actually not 100% done. There's a few things I need to do. It's a little dusty, but I wanted to brass up the carbs. These are supposed to be looking like Hollies, and right now they look like AFBs. So Carter AFBs. So I don't know. I've been thinking about playing around with it, but I don't know. It just hangs out in the lounge with us. So that's what he was talking about. I wish the damn thing ran. It would take me less time to build it if it did. Let's see. 71 Vet had an L88 454. I don't know how many Vets were made. Actually, L88 would not be a 454. That would have been I can't remember the alphabet soup for the 454s, but actually for 71, when they made the switch to the 454, that was actually a real, I was looking for one when I was younger, man. I wanted one of those so bad I couldn't see straight. Symphonics asks, any JDM cars I have a soft spot for? Yeah, actually, there are. Well, I say JDM, not true JDM as in Japanese domestic market only, but the Conquest and the Starion from the late 80s. I love those cars. And I don't know, it's kind of a gray import. Well, it is technically a gray import. Definitely like those cars quite a bit. Used to have a lot of fun with one of those back in the day, but that would kind of be, like for me, like an old school throwback. But aside from that, let me think about this for a minute. I mean, most of the experience that I have with any import cars or the Japanese cars have come from just stuff that was a true import, not an actual JDM car. So, um, but if you're talking true JDM, obviously the Skyline because Gran Turismo. Let's see. Stephen Kennedy says 71 vet. I remember my dad had engine pulled at dealer. Uh, let's see. He bought and sent to Chicago to have balance and blueprinted and bored oversized pistons. Raced it fun. Only class let him run. I hear that. I'd love an old vet on a drag strip. There was a guy that ran a 70 Corvette here in Baytown. Real clean car. I mean, it looked stock, but I think he was running a 468. I don't know what all he had done to it. He was hitting it with a 200 shot of nice stock, and it screamed. Sounded good too, but it wasn't over the top. Just had a little bit of chop to it, but yeah, it ran good. Phoenix 98's asking, I don't know, what biggest in vet 427? No, in 70, either 70 or 71, and for 72 and in 73 you could get a 454. And those were 70 was not a low compression, 71 is not low compression, but 2, 3, and 4 I believe were. Stephen Benoit says, thanks for the input, and he likes the model. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the manufacturer of that. But anyway, yeah, it's out there for sure. Toby Rama, the 454 was LS platform. It was the LS6 454, but that is not it's not an LS platform. That's actually the older designations for the big blocks, or for the big blocks were all LS. Small blocks were all LTs. But yeah, the old engines, man. I tell you something. Phoenix 98 saying, haha, I need to do his homework on the old engines. The old engines, man, I'll tell you something. That's really where the legend and the lifestyle and the core of this thing that we do. It's all based on generation. It's all based on stories. It's all based on spending time with your family and your friends, and just having a ball and a blast at a drag strip. And it's funny because everybody's got that uncle, everybody's got that brother, everybody's got that friend or family member that had that car that was the fastest thing on the planet, right? And it had either it was a Buick with a 455, it could have been a Trans Am with a 400, could have been anything, right? And but reality is, they're, by today's standards, they're not that fast, and people will have a tendency to look down on the performance numbers of the original guard, so to speak, the original big block hot rods. And what people don't seem to realize is that back then, speed took on a completely different meaning than it does today. And it's funny because what I'm about to say will not make any sense to anybody unless you've actually driven something that was built in the 60s. And I don't even, whether it's a truck, a car, or a boat, it doesn't really matter, it seems. But back then, there were no provisions for stability control. There were no ABS to keep you from sliding that thing around. Tire technology was a joke. And so, at least by today's standards, I mean, we're judging this by, 2019 standards basically at this point. So, excuse me. So the thing is that if you've ever driven one, it's actually kind of a spooky thing, because you're driving a car that doesn't really weigh that much, that has the technical sophistication of a lawnmower, and is in some cases completely overpowered for the tires that it has, and has the handling characteristics of a farm implement, right? So if when we're talking about speed and power, oh, and the chassis rigidity, the thing just all of them flexed. My dad had a 69 Corvette convertible, big block car, and going over certain railroad tracks, the chassis would flex and the hood, the corner of the hood would pop up. That's how much those cars flex. So, we're not talking about cars with modern driving characteristics. And so when you're talking about that, and you put it in perspective, it's spooky running those cars up over, much more than 120, 130 miles an hour. If something spooky happens, you're not going to reel that thing in. There's no computer to help you reel it in. It is much more exciting. You are a part of the driving experience with those cars, and forward thinking, watching the horizon, all of these things really start to take place. I don't know why I'm going off on that tangent, but just something that I was reminded of here. Let's see. Symphonic says he's been researching intakes for his LS3. What I've been finding is a lot of people saying that an intake will not make that much of a difference over the stock engine or stock intake. Thoughts? So the LS3 intake is actually a really good intake manifold, where the LS manifold's got a bad rap with the LS2, and a lot of that had to do with manufacturing problems, or at least lots of casting flash in the runners, and just general poor quality of that intake manifold. The LS3 is a really good engine. On a stock car, it is not worth your money, time, effort, or anything to swap intakes on that car. Stick with the LS3 intake, and you'll be a lot happy for it. Keenan H asked, thoughts on the Mopar 446 pack from the 60s and 70s? Dude, do I have thoughts on that? So, the funny thing is that everybody gets all frothy about the 426, but the reality is that the king of the road was the 440. And let me just say this too. So one of the funny things about the Hemi is everybody does clamor over it, but the fact is that they didn't make that many of them. The reason why they didn't make that many of them wasn't because they were expensive. Let me put this into perspective, guys. Okay, let's talk about a Challenger or a Roadrunner. Let's talk about a Roadrunner because, you guys, if you guys have been around me long enough, you know that that's the car that got away from me when I was young, and that's still one of my favorite cars ever. So 69 Roadrunner would have cost you, in 1969 dollars, a base model, let's say $4,200. Okay. Oddly enough, if you do the conversion, that translates to about $42,000 in today's money. For a top of the line 440, well, not top of the line, probably midline Roadrunner. The Hemi was an $800 option, so technically, but an $8,000 option would have taken you from a car that adjusted would have been $42,000 to a car that's $50,000. Not even close to the difference between. That's the range of today between a base model Scat Pack Core and like an SRT. Completely doable. And the reason why the Hemi didn't sell as well wasn't because it was some coveted, back corner of the VHS store, motor porn type thing. It wasn't because it was that great. It's because it didn't sell that well because it didn't perform that well on the street. Now, granted, you and a couple of buddies and a case of beer over the course of a weekend, intake manifold, headers, camshaft, cylinder heads, and you've got yourself an engine that's making a lot of power, but not many people were doing that, or at least the guys that were doing it were dedicated racers to get the most out of the 426. But the reality is the 426 on the street sucked by comparison to the 440. Tip-in throttle response, nowhere near as good. And by the way, I've driven them, so I know what I'm talking about here. Tip-in throttle response, not as good as the 440. I'll give you an idea. The airflow velocity is one of the things that, as if you're on the MDE side, cylinder velocity at specific RPM is something that you're looking for in terms of fuel atomization and all the technical blah, 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 insert motor nerd stuff here. Anyway, long story short, 440 would achieve the same cylinder velocity at just under 5,000 RPM that it would take the Hemi over 6,000 RPM to get to. Now, granted, that's at a much higher volume of air at the same velocity. Read that as more power, but the 440 was just so much more responsive. The initial tip-in torque hit was so much better with the 440. If I were building a car, I would be hard-pressed to move away from the wedge engine into a Hemi for two reasons. One, cost. Two, you can put a little bit of work into the 440 and build a ton of power that would rival any Hemi. And three, well, let's be honest. I mean, if you're doing a kind of a stock build, you want street manners, you want street reliability. Both of them are reliable in that respect, but I want something that's going to work with me and not try to work against me. I don't need it to be something that I need to give attention to. I want it to be something that I want to give attention to. Hemi is the polar opposite of that for a lot of guys. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But my thoughts on it, man, I love that combination. And, you know, like I say, realistically for the street, like if you're doing 8th mile racing, dude, go with a 440, man. You will thank yourself time and time again for it. Let's see. Stephen Kennedy checks in with, yesterday I saw an article, Dodge is going to put a Elephant in 2021. Wide body, 600-pound lighter, launch brake, and having torque flight auto training being made to handle it. Well, several questions there in one. I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. So will the trans be able to handle it? That's the question that everybody's asking. It will not chime in with 1,000 horsepower. You can rest assured with that. I still don't know what fuel they ran that 426 on to get it to 1,000 horsepower. But you got to also remember that that is a crate engine. It's not being rated as an SAE rating because there's no exhaust system to put on the car to rate it for SAE. And what I mean by that is when a manufacturer rates an engine SAE, it has to have the full exhaust system bolted onto it. Nose to exhaust tip. Well, the Elephant is a crate motor, so it can be rated as gross horsepower. Again, I don't know about front engine accessory drives or anything like that or how that was working with it, but by it, I mean the testing parameters. But what I will say is, you know, let's say SAE number on that engine is really more like 930-ish, 940. And then run it on 93 octane. That's going to bring the power down about another 100 horsepower, so 840-ish. Again, it's speculation, but that would be basically what you would be looking at in terms of power. In that respect, HP90 will handle it just fine. You start throwing the power to it, though, and I mean, God, listen, there's a lot of HP90s running around in cars making a shitload of power, so I'd say the HP90 will hold it, but for how long, I'm not sure because that 426 is going to have a higher initial torque hit. So something to consider. As far as, you know, the wide body drop in weight, FCA has been talking about dropping weight with that platform. So, you know, we'll see where that goes. I would like to see him do something as a swan song, but again, we'll see. Toby Ram says, I forgot his question about the 454. Well, what question was that? Where did it go? Last one I got from you on here is the 454 was an LS platform. It was the LS6. And I said, nope, it is not an LS platform. It is a Mark big block, Mark 3 big block. Mark 4. Shit, now I can't remember. Got me wondering. So post it up again. I'll answer it. Symphonic says, even though I'm a Corvette guy, if I were to get an old car, it might be a Boss 427. Yeah, the old Boss cars, you know, or be a 429 actually for the Boss. But yeah, if you could find one, actually, who was making, somebody started making heads for those cars again. I cannot remember the name of the guy. but they were putting they were making them compatible with the FE engine, so you could get a 460 and run the Boss 429 heads on it. And that's what I guess that's what I think that's what the engine was. Anyway, God, it's been years. It's been probably 3 years since I even looked into that. 4 years. So, but yeah, that'd be a lot of fun to do a build. But here's the thing: good luck getting your hands on a freaking fastback Mustang, even just a bombed out roller. These guys think they hit the freaking lottery with those cars. Like, dude, they made a jillion of these things. Quit asking $7,000 for some piece of crap roller that's about to render itself back into the earth. Stephen Kennedy, wider rubber tires too on wide body. Yep, that's true. Don't forget about that. In fact, I've heard that, with that wide body, they were talking about actually, what was it? Somebody was talking about going even wider than what they already have now, but I don't know how they're going to do that. But yeah, that'd be great to see them actually do a swan song for that car. Phoenix 98 says he's got an 81 Trans Am with an Olds 455 swap. It's got torque for days. You're damn right it does. And for you guys that don't know, that Olds 455 was it was actually a lightweight big block. Those engines had they weren't built as stout as the GM, the Chevrolet big blocks. But that's not a knock on them. They were light. You couldn't really turn high RPM with them, but they were a lightweight big block. So I think the weight penalty was only like 60 pounds more than a normal small block. And because of that, a lot of boat builders started putting them in boats for jet boats because they made a god awful amount of torque and they didn't weigh as much as a normal big block. So little fun fact for you. Donald Powers, dude, I drove those rides. 69 Roadrunner. God, man, you're killing me. Hemi car was insurance too. That's true. Insurance was high. Says he ordered a 71 Hemi Cuda. Driven a road Hemi run in 71. I tell you what, I have heard about that whole deal with the insurance. I've also heard that just the reality of where cars were going at that time. You had this really strong run of these high-powered cars, and they were obviously having a reputation of not being very reliable, which would kind of make sense when people are out there beating the hell out of them. So, it wasn't just one thing. My ass keeps sliding down in this damn chair. It wasn't just one thing. It was a multitude of stuff. But, when comparing the two, just in terms of market conditions and things like that, I can tell you, from experience that obviously if I would have been buying one back then, I'd have been a sucker for the Hemi, but yeah, that 440 is stout. But yeah, insurance, God, could you imagine that's the funny thing. Could you imagine one of those cars, the adjusted price today, the power and performance and just the styling, for that amount of money by today's standards, and knowing that was the top tier, but they cap out at like, an adjusted 50 grand. It's crazy. Chris Duvall asks, is it worth getting a custom tune on a manual Challenger RT 2017 5.7? I know it does a lot for autos. Wasn't sure on the manual. It doesn't do as much for the manual, to be honest with you. You'll pick up a little bit of throttle response. It depends on the exhaust that you're running on the car. If you're running no cats, obviously you'd want to get a tune for that. But not so much, really. Not for the manual cars. Automatics for sure, but not for the manual. Let's see. Keenan asks, most horsepower you can get out of an NA 5.7. Well, depends on what you mean by most and how annoyed you want to be with that thing and what your idea of drivability is. But, with a aftermarket camshaft, a little bit larger throttle body, long tube headers, catless mids, or high flow cats, if you want to stay green, you can get real close to 392 power numbers. You won't get there with torque, but let's say if a 392 puts down 410 to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno, you can get that 5.7 to about 400-ish on that same dyno, but torque is going to be down a little bit, and obviously you're going to make the power higher up in the RPM range. But that's if you get real crazy with it. Typically, if a 392 makes 410 and you're doing a more conservative, something that'll actually work on the street, 385, I think, is the highest number that I've ever seen in a car that actually would run well on the street. Toby Rama asked, was the 454 LS6 the only one capable of 450 horse in production in 1970, or were there others? The 454 LS6 was the only one rated at 450 horsepower. I want to say that nobody else had an engine rated that high. And I believe that is the engine that would have basically rounded off the balance of the cars in the 60s as far as the actual horsepower wars. The 426 was killed in 1971. Let's see. Yeah, and that, the 454 would soldier on, but as a lower compression power plant. And Ford doesn't really enter into the fray here because they've always, been basically third tier in the big block wars, if you're not counting the Boss engines in the side oiler 427, which both engines were equally impressive. Cool history on that Boss 429, by the way. Neat engine. It's kind of weird. They always had the side oiler and that engine at the same time. That side oiler 427 is what was in the 427 Cobra that Carroll Shelby was running. Oddly enough, they had actually been doing testing with an all aluminum 390 at one point, but the highest number of wins came with the small block car, the 289. If you ever look at, in fact, I don't know where the book is. It's floating around here somewhere. If you look at the record for the big block cars, there's a ton of DNF, did not finish after that for the big block cars because they fucking blew up. But they were winning when they let go. So, yeah. Let's see. Challenger Menace asks, what are my top 3 favorite Mopars to own of all time? So if I were to own Mopars myself, the first one I would say would be factory lightweight 64 Polara 4-speed with the original Super Commando 426 Hemi would be in that list. I'm not going to say 1, 2, or 3. I'm just going to use 3 as a whole. Second would be a 69 Roadrunner, automatic center console shift with a 440. And to round out the list, I would say a mid-60s Chrysler Imperial would probably round out the list. So I could have a little bit of everything. I could have a 4-speed drag race car, something as a street brawler, and then something I could just pimp around. And I think that would be my top 3 of all time. And as a runner-up to that, I would say runner-up would probably have to be a Super B, only because it's gaudy as hell looking and I love that shit. Symphonics is saying that he's been watching a lot of the rest of mod shows, and whenever they put an LS into a car, it's always the LS3. Why are these companies not going to the LT1? Great question. The LT1 is a shitty engine as a swap engine for a couple of reasons. One, it's direct injected. That can give guys a fit. And two, there is so much support for the LS3 that you almost can't compete with it because it's light. It makes real good horsepower. It is infinitely upgradable in terms of, which direction would you like to take it. Whether you're doing an LS swap in a truck and you want to make good grunt, like in a 4x4, like a 67 Chevy pickup, do a 4x4, lots of grunt, or you can go with more power still if you want to put it in like an old Chevy 2 or something like that. It's the LT1. It's and not to mention everything that goes with putting that direct injection engine together and to make it work in a swap is going to be a lot more expensive because they're expensive, and just so much easier to go with an LS3. You can make whatever horsepower you want with an LS3, like literally whatever horsepower you could feasibly want to make, you can make with the LS3, whereas the LT1, not quite as much. And it's just such a, for me, the LS3 is just such a fun engine too, that, it's unintimidating, and it makes it, just makes the whole process that much more enjoyable because, again, from a financial standpoint, power standpoint, it's so versatile. That's the main reason. Christoval asks, so if I did shorty headers, fast man throttle body, and just kept my stock exhaust, would it still be okay without a tune? Yeah, it'd be fine without it. Well, no, it won't. Let me tell you why. You will get into false knock with those shorty headers right off the bat. You're going to have to adjust your knock sensor sensitivity there. It's just not a, I don't know. It's just not a good idea to try to run headers without making that adjustment. Let's see. Challenger Menace. So no Demon or modern Mopar on that list. He was asking about what my top 3 Mopars would be. Yeah. So I've spent time with the Demon, and I like the Demon a lot, but for me, I own a Hellcat now, and I love my Hellcat. Don't get me wrong, but when I think of, if I'm posed with the question of top 3 Mopars, I'm immediately going to think old school, only because that is the genesis of Mopar for me. That's the pinnacle of styling. With the Imperial, it's the pinnacle of performance and the promise of things to come with that original super stock Dodge Polara. It's the legend of Mopar on the street with the lightweight Roadrunner. That for me, that's really what set Mopar on my map, so to speak. Now, in terms of modern Mopars, there's you don't have you can't really generate a list. You've got the Magnum, which they don't make anymore, which is a damn shame, because could you imagine a Hellcat powered Magnum? It would be like the best of all worlds. But you've got the Magnum, the 300, the Charger, the Challenger, and then all the different versions of that. But getting back to it, the Demon, I like it. It's a good car. It very durable. Go out and literally beat it senseless, and it just keeps asking for more. I can't say enough good things about the Demon, or the Hellcat for that matter. The Hellcat's basically the same thing. And aside from a few guys having a problem with drive shafts here and there, I can tell you that is a very robust combination. The 392s are a ton of fun as well, especially when you consider the fact that you basically are well in the knowledge that you can take a Scat Pack core, put a set of drag radials on it, take it to the drag strip, and damn near run 11s with it. So, it's tough to pick out of a list of modern Mopars because, again, the list is just so limited. And there's so many variants of the same car that are out there. you know, I guess if we're going to talk about modern Mopars, top of the list would be my Hellcat Revlon. Second on the list would be a Demon, and third on the list would be a 1320. But no, I take it back. First would be my car. Second would be a Demon. Third would be probably a Hellcat Charger. I really do like the Chargers a lot, and from a technical standpoint, they are actually better than the Challenger from a structural rigidity standpoint. But then you also have to look at like modern, like what designates modern. And Stephen Kennedy actually, Stephen Kennedy was saying, I was going to say, you want your Super Bee back. Yeah, let's see. Well, it was a Roadrunner that got away from me. Then Stephen Kennedy says, "What? No 2.2 liter Charger?" Man, I tell you what. It depends on how you're looking at it. It's funny. There was this ugly puppy stage that Mopar went through where they were actually very forward thinking with the Omni and the Omni GL, well, the Omni GLH specifically, and the GLHS. Those were really killer cars. In fact, I did some cleaning the other day, and I know I've got this shit around here somewhere. Hang on. I've got like old brochures and stuff like that of these old cars. I love collecting, it's, super inexpensive stuff. I mean, this isn't, except for that one that I got for that 426. That was a little pricey, but not very pricey. But the older front wheel drive Mopars, for some reason, they kind of do something for me, but only from a curiosity standpoint. Let's see. Toby Rama asks, wasn't there a 428 cubic inch Ford as well, which based on the 427 side order? Nope, that is not accurate at all. 428 was a completely different engine than the 427. And wasn't the 429 the basis for the 460? I believe it was. Yes, it was. Yeah, the 428. The 428 was used in, that was basically a boat anchor. The 428 was a very generic, large displacement, corporate, reciprocating, makes cars go type of an engine. It really, they put those in Thunderbirds. They put them in a little bit of everything. And in various forms of modes of tune, you could get some decent power out of them, but the 429 was a completely different animal altogether at the time, and obviously the 427 by comparison, completely different engine. If I were to build a big block, it would be a 460. I wouldn't even worry about the rest of them. You can make plenty of power with a 460. Reliable up to about 700 horsepower, just a stock, rebuilt long block. Let's see. Keaton H checking out for the night. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate you. Have a good sleep. Let's see. Mopar No Car. Do you think Dodge screwed us because they added Super Track Pack on a V6? That ain't the only way they screwed us, brother. Nah, they didn't screw us, man. Look, there's always going to be a waterfall. There's no way to get around that. The reality is, I mean, look, the whole trickle down thing, I get it. Some of the styling is a bit cringy, especially when you look at the GT. I don't know what package it is. The GT, guys, for you guys that don't know, is the V6. I mean, you can get that car with a Hellcat front fascia and an SRT hood, and it's a V6. Charger guys have been doing this stuff for a long time, so it can get. I mean, when you spend premium dollars for a specific look on a car, you kind of want to have that exclusivity. I don't want to share that with cars that are down the line. It just, I don't like it. But that's what they're doing. And again, it helps them sell units. And the more units they sell, the more sweet hot rods they can bring to us. So if looking at a car with what I consider the wrong front fascia or the wrong hood or the wrong tail treatment, if those cars selling means that we get another car like the Demon, or we get something new that's real exciting, then screw it. I say go for it. At this point, I'm all right with it. Symphonics, top 5 engines since 2000. Number 1 that comes to mind, 2000 Cobra R 4-valve 5.4. Second on the list is going to be the 392. Third on the list is going to be the Hellcat. Fourth on the list is going to be the, I would say Terminator, if I haven't already mentioned it, and then the GT 500 5.4. So, and by association, the Ford GT. I know that's a lot of Fords, but notice there wasn't any Chevrolets in there. I can't get really worked up over the LS7. What almost came to mind there, but I don't know. It just too many issues with that engine. But that would be my number 6. Would be an LS7. Toby says, one of my bucket list trucks is Little Red Express. And my top bucket list is a Shelby 500 Eleanor. Little Red Express is actually a super cool car. The Shelby 500 Eleanor, that's if you guys don't know, if you've never seen Gone in 60 Seconds, that was the Halo car in that movie. The car actually never existed in real life, but sure looked good in the movie. It's making somebody a lot of money in making remakes of that car. I would say that if you could find a clean Little Red Express, that would be pretty awesome. And for you guys that don't know, Little Red Express was a loophole that Dodge found in terms of making a hot rod back in the 80s and late 70s. And they took a real hot rodded 360, put it in a truck, and then also gave it stacks like a big rig. It's hysterical. But the fact is that it beat the that year, 0 to 60 and in the quarter mile, I believe. So, yeah. Stephen Kennedy, GLHS Shelby Charger. Yeah, that's another one. I don't know. This thing's, for some reason, out of curiosity, I just love those things. Yes, SRT Crazy says, speaking of the Dart, I'd love to put the new Elephant motor in one. Man, I tell you what, you're going to see a lot of Darts with that Elephant engine if people start buying them. David Onofio Zappa says, I definitely articulate myself well. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Many thanks. Challenger Menace asks, any idea why we are not seeing all-wheel drive in V8 Challengers and Chargers? Any talk of that? That's a great question. I would love to sit down with an engineer and ask them why that has not been the case. If I had to guess, I would say packaging, number 1, because, well, it's hard to really argue that when you have the V6 that has the all-wheel drive system. But it'd be number 1, packaging for the V8. So I'm sure there's a reason behind that. And number 2 could potentially be weight and research and development just in terms of putting one together. But for outright performance, I would love to see it. I mean, they're doing great with it with the Trackhawk. Why can't they do it with the Charger or the Challenger or something? Anything. I originally thought, by the way, that the Demon was going to be all-wheel drive. I thought that would have been amazing to have a hot-rodded Hellcat platform with an all-wheel drive driveline. Could you imagine the possibilities? So obviously it is what it is for good reason. But when the GT all-wheel drive was being talked about, I was kind of, I don't know, quietly hoping that we would see that, but didn't work out that way. but it would be cool if they did something like that, or in the future, be able to have, some type of a all-wheel drive platform that's not an SUV. I just don't know that they have anything that will really work with that. And realistically, the Trackhawk is kind of already there. So, for those that want that all-wheel drive system, there's that. Plus the cost of it. You ever seen the cost of a Trackhawk? Shit, man, that thing's coming in at like 90 grand, dude. So, yeah, there's that. Let's see. Toby Rama asked, my top 5 motors from the total performance era. Define total performance era. I'm not really sure what that term really indicates, but yeah, define what you mean by that, and I'd love to chat about that. David Zappa says, I have a few SRT products. Next project, taking a 66 Barracuda Hemi under glass. I will be ordering the Elephant. I tell you what, that would be a neat one to do. 66, if you can recreate that one, that would be a nice one. NHRA guy 532 says, saw the old car run 1130. Yes, it did. Tune question, did you pull timing at the hit? How much total did you have in it? No timing was pulled at the hit, and total timing on that one was, well, it's the street tune. So 17.5 degrees was what it was running on the big end. That car, by the way, did not like a lot of timing at 18 degrees and 18.5 degrees. And this is without the cold weather scaler, which was actually numbed down to 2 degrees at her for temperature, but it didn't like a lot of timing. In fact, it didn't respond well at all to timing. It actually kind of hated it. Have I run Q16? Yes, we ran not in that car. We ran Q16 in the Demon after the lower pulley and upper pulley were put on it. Don't like it as much as E85 at all. As a matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say that if you live in an area where you can't get E85, I would stick with MS-109 as far as race gas goes. I mean, obviously it depends on what you're up to with it, but it just did, for some reason, Q16 for me just didn't really do what I would have liked to have done. But I mean, it is basically, it's like a knock-proof fuel. I mean, you can make some mistakes with Q16 and still have an engine to talk about. But if it would have been my car, it would have been E85. Take that straight to the bank. Oh, you're talking about, okay, so Toby Rama, you're talking about total performance era, meaning muscle car wars of the 60s. I would say first and foremost would be the L88 427. The next one would be the Super Commando solid roller or solid flat tap at 426 Hemi. Third would be the Buick 455, just because it is a killer engine. Fourth would be the side oiler 427, even though it was kind of limited production and not really an everyman's hot rod. Didn't really have a whole lot of run. Still a great engine. I would say next on the list would be probably, let me think about that for a minute. That's a tough one because I'm kind of conflicted here. I want to go with the 446 pack on that. And then if I haven't rounded off the list, I will kill the list with the Pontiac 421. We'll round out that list. See, 6.1 intake manifold. Will inside grind help? Will an inside grind help? I'm not sure. Oh, you're talking about the short side radius on that intake manifold, I believe. It'll help it a little bit, but what I would suggest, and I haven't heard of anybody doing this, but if I were to do one, I would send one to Extrude Hone and just have it Extrude Hone. But The main issue with that intake manifold is that you're still dealing with a long runner intake that doesn't really flow that well on an NA car. They work great for boosted applications, but they're just not as good for an NA car. And really, there's not a great intake manifold out there for the NA stuff. So, unfortunately. Cristobal, I missed your second question. What was your second question, man? Where do we go? Let me scroll back in here. Well, I got the one. I think I talked about, let's see, so if I did shorty headers, fast man throttle body, and just kept the stock exhaust, would it still be okay without a tune? We talked about the headers. That's the last one we got in here. Did you miss it? Did you get up to get a sandwich? Did you go to the bathroom? What happened? Let's see. Well, if you missed it, you were asking if it would be okay to do that with a stock tune. You're talking about that being the headers, fast man throttle body, and keeping the stock exhaust, meaning the stock nuts and everything else. No, you will need a tune for those headers because you're going to be hitting an issue with your knock sensor sensitivity. You put those headers on there, your knock sensors are going to go crazy because they're going to be thinking that it's knocking and it's going to yank a bunch of timing. So you'll actually lose power with those headers without a tune. So, well, all right, guys. Well, we are into this for almost right at 2 hours. I am going to check out at this point. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Oh, wait, we got one more. Challenger Menace says he's got a 17 Challenger Scat Pack. Have some fun saved up to start mining for performance. What's your recommendation? The best way to spend up 10 grand? Best way to spend 10 grand on that car. I would say custom grind camshaft, long tube headers, tune, and Fastman throttle body, and port the intake manifold. That will be about as much as you will want to do to that car. Taking it much farther past that is, you're just not going to see a whole lot of gain at that point. And don't mess with long tubes until you do a camshaft. Until that point, don't worry about it. You don't need them. I've proven it over and over again, man. So let's see. Toby Rom is asking, were the 460 and 7.3 Power Stroke the same size? No, the 460 is 7.4 liter. And they are completely different engines, by the way. NHRA guys, see you next week, brother. Phoenix 98. Thank you very much. Appreciate the kind words. Y'all have a great one. I am out. Adios.